Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm Hallie Tecco.
I'm Michael Esquivel.
And I'm Steve Krause. And every Monday, we bring you the latest in healthcare innovation as we sit down with entrepreneurs and industry experts.
So buckle up and join us as we figure out how to improve healthcare for all. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Hallie Tecco, and today I'm talking with Dr. Holly Urban, the VP of Business Development and Strategy at Wolters Kluwer Health. They are the makers of UpToDate, the leading clinical decision support tool used by over 3 million clinicians worldwide. It was launched over 30 years ago, and UpToDate has become the gold standard for evidence-based medicine, relied upon in over 90% of U.S. academic medical centers. And you may have heard, especially if you're a clinician, the product just underwent a massive transformation with the launch of Expert AI, which integrates generative AI capabilities directly into the tool. Holly, congrats on the product launch and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. We're very, very excited about this solution, and it's a pleasure to chat with you today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So for the listeners who may not be familiar with Wolters Kluwer, it is an enormous publicly traded company with over 20,000 employees, over $6 billion in revenue last year, and UpToDate is one of many products that the company offers. What else should our listeners know about the company to ground us in our discussion today?
Yeah, as you noted, it's a global company. We're in more than 180 countries, and it started in 1836 publishing textbooks. And then has grown over the years. So it's a long-standing, successful company. We have multiple verticals. Healthcare is obviously the vertical we'll be discussing today, but we also have tax and accounting, legal and regulatory, and financial compliance that we cover. In healthcare specifically, UpToDate is one of our flagship products, the clinical decision support solution. But we also have Ovid, which helps with researchers. We have the Lippincott portfolio, which is nursing education, and tools like Sentry 7 drug diversion, which helps with monitoring drugs in the hospital setting. So we have a lot of different assets across our health platform.
And you've had a lot of roles in digital health, including you were the CMIO of Cerner Corporation. You've had product roles, business development roles, and you've been a practicing clinician. I just found out a pediatrician. I assume you were using UpToDate when you were practicing. Maybe tell us about your career arc.
Yeah, so I'm a pediatrician and an informaticist. I practice primary care pediatrics, and I sort of learned about healthcare IT when I was working in risk management at my local hospital, just sort of helping out. And they had developed a new solution for medication reconciliation, which is where physicians compare the medications that they have at home and then have to reconcile it against the medications that they have in the hospital. So the IT department at the hospital developed a homegrown solution. They tossed it over to the quality management group. They said, Holly, you're a physician. Why don't you roll this out? And it was a nightmare. They had developed it with no clinical input whatsoever.
Oh, no.
We had better compliance on paper than we did with this tool. But it sort of sold me on, wow, there's a huge potential here, right? There's huge patient safety implications with good medication reconciliation. So to have physicians sort of at the designing phase, and that's what really got me excited. And so I switched over into healthcare IT so I could help design solutions that would help meet physicians and other clinical users' needs.
How hard was that to switch from a clinical role into a technical role?
Well, going from, primary care pediatrics, hands-on, taking care of babies all day long to this corporate environment, it was definitely a wake-up call. So my first company I worked for, 6 weeks in, they did a massive layoff. And I was like, what's even happening right now?
What's a layoff?
I had no idea. Yeah. So, but I've learned a lot over the past 20 years in healthcare IT. And at one point, I actually went back and got my MBA because I thought, you know what, you don't get a lot of business education in medical school. So I wanted to go back and sort of get those foundational knowledge to help me move forward in my career.
And in your role today, are you working closely with clinicians?
Yes, yes. So my role at Wolters Kluwer, as you noted, I came to UpToDate as an UpToDate user. So it's just been an incredible pleasure and honor to work with our large editorial team who author this incredible evidence-based content. So it's something that I just am amazed that these people are all mission-driven, really want to make sure that the best clinical information is in the hands of clinicians so they can make better decisions at the point of care. So my primary focus is on innovation, working with the editorial team. So all of those clinicians, physicians, nurses, pharmacists who write the clinical content.
So let's talk about the product because it has everyone buzzing right now.
Yeah.
Unlike most of the models that are available today, Expert AI's big differentiator is obviously that it is strictly trained and grounded in UpToDate's knowledge database versus the entire internet. Tell us about this walled garden approach, and then what is the actual clinician user experience like?
Right. So UpToDate has been around for 30 years. We have a network of 7,400 physicians who are considered experts in the field, who author all the clinical content. So by building an AI solution on top of these well-known, well-loved, well-trusted clinical resources, that allows us to put out a solution that can sort of maintain that trust. So clinicians know when they're using this new AI tool, which gets them the things that they want, the answer to a specific clinical question with speed, with accuracy, but based on wholly up to date and 100% traceable back to up-to-date sources, it really lends that element of trust that you don't hear that word when you talk about LLMs. You don't talk about trust, but this solution, because it is entirely based on up-to-date, it preserves that trust that the clinicians have when they're using this solution.
Yeah, I remember seeing a meme that had gone viral about someone who took a picture of his clinician using ChatGPT in the doctor's visit and was like, oh no, we're in trouble. And I don't think that was common, but I can imagine that clinicians were just so eager to have a tool, but a lot of folks are rightfully concerned about hallucinations, and you guys claim to be able to avoid them. So explain to us how UpToDate avoids hallucinations and why ChatGPT can't do the same.
Right. Well, some of the studies have been super interesting. One of the reasons why ChatGPT hallucinates is because it's oriented to give you an answer, right? So if it can't find the answer, it will make up an answer. We've architected our solution so that if it doesn't find it in UpToDate, it will say, we don't have this in UpToDate. So if you ask UpToDate Expert AI, what's the capital of Montana? It will say, I don't have that information, as opposed to trying to get that, which is what a source of a lot of the hallucinations. So we've done a lot of work from a technical standpoint to make sure that it's not leaking and that we're not getting any of the foundational knowledge into the responses. And we've tested it thoroughly to make sure that all of the information that's present in these responses is thoroughly based on UpToDate.
Well, and it's cited, so you can also verify the sort of results you're getting.
That's right.
I did see a study that showed that the more information an LLM is trained on, the more data it's trained on, actually, the more likely it is to have hallucinations. And we were expecting hallucinations to go down, but we've actually seen the opposite, which is pretty scary. So the foundation is one competitive advantage, but really the other one is distribution, because UpToDate is already part of most every clinician's workflow. It doesn't require opening up another app. How much of just app fatigue do you think clinicians face?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a challenge when you look at out there, there's all sorts of point solutions. And I think the advantage of a solution like UpToDate, they're already using it, and it provides value for them across their clinical practice. So it's not just one decision or one sort of piece of the workflow. Broadly across all of the spectrum of clinical care that they provide, it helps broadly across the care because we cover so much content, deep and rich. And the other piece is that, so they're already in UpToDate, so they can very quickly get to expert AI. But we really feel like the opportunity is to be more embedded in the workflow. Because, one of the reasons why I'm passionate about clinical decision support is to make sure that we can help physicians and other clinicians make it easy to do the right choice. And the best way to do that is to be in the clinical workflow. And so that's why we're partnering with companies like Abridge and Suki and Microsoft to say, how can we make sure that this incredible clinical decision support really helping clinicians make good decisions is where they need it. And that's in their workflow tools.
Yeah. Which is interesting because, speaking of app fatigue, speaking of working with all these startups, healthcare AI startups are absolutely having a moment. There's so much venture funding pouring into the space. In fact, if you are not an AI company, raising in healthcare right now is nearly impossible because this is what all the investors are chasing. And you have, as a strategist, have decided to see these startups as potential collaborators versus competitors. We have a lot of founders that listen to this show. Maybe tell us about how you think about working with startup partners and how you kind of vet those partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned some of the partnerships we've had. I think ultimately, like I said, our goal is to get more in the clinical workflow. So we want to be partnering with companies that are doing sort of novel and interesting ways. So wherever clinicians are going to have their fingers at the keyboards, if they can have UpToDate at their fingertips, that's what we want to do. So it's a lot about where they fit into the clinical workflow and their longevity. Yeah. Are they something that's going to have a long runway in terms of adoption, in terms of long-term viability? And ultimately, it comes down to, are they doing things that are going to help the clinicians make life easier for them? And if that's the case, that's somebody that we definitely want to partner with.
Yeah. And you're in the business of curated, trusted knowledge, but at a time when knowledge is arguably becoming commoditized by AI, how do you think about adapting to the new world and skating to where the puck is going?
Is it becoming commoditized truly? I mean, when you think about that sort of that pyramid of data and then information and then knowledge and then wisdom, I would argue that AI is data and it can compile information for you, but is it truly giving you knowledge? Is it truly giving you wisdom? Right? So could AI compile a novel and have it be readable? Yes. Would it knock your socks off like Margaret Atwood? No. So I still think there's a place for that human wisdom to come in. So let's use AI to help compile information. But I think we're always going to need people to have that knowledge, that wisdom, and to know where to act. And that's why UpToDate's network of 7,400 experts in the field, they're the ones who can review a vast amount of medical knowledge and understand this matters, and this needs to be reflected in UpToDate so that other clinicians know what to do.
Yeah. But it feels tangibly different from the Dr. Google quote unquote problem that we used to have, because it's just so much easier to get the exact answer. It might not be the right answer, but to get a very specific sounding answer as a patient.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think that's a good thing. So I'm a third generation physician. My grandfather was a GP. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm a pediatrician. And, there was a time, especially my dad will talk about this, when, the doctor's word was law, right? Like, that's it. You're going to do what I'm going to tell you, a very paternalistic approach. And I think AI has an opportunity to really help us democratize care a little bit more. So that information asymmetry that exists between patient and physician, if we can collapse that gap and get closer to true, shared decision-making, I think that's a great thing if AI can help you do that. Help me have an informed conversation with my physician. But again, it always comes back to the source of the data. If it's based on misinformation, if it's based on, the World Wide Web and all of its dark corners, then that's not going to make you an informed patient. So you definitely need to make sure that the information you're using as a patient is a trusted source.
Well, And UpToDate has patient-facing information.
Yes, we do.
So how do you think that will evolve with now AI?
Yeah, so this is something I'm super excited about because all of our patient information is harmonized with the UpToDate professional information, so that the patient guidance is the same as the physician guidance. And so we're talking to companies that can they provide patient-facing education based on an UpToDate guidance so that they can have that same conversation that the provider would have as they review UpToDate. So to have those things come together, to me, that's truly going to be informed decision-making between patient and provider.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anyone managing a chronic illness that needs to understand how to take control of their symptoms, how to manage medication, et cetera, something like that, I think could be super powerful. And as you said, like the old paternalistic model of healthcare hasn't served us well, especially women, hasn't served us well.
So, that docs used to carry on coffee mugs that said, your Google search does not equal my MD. But, anymore, if a patient comes in and says, I want to learn about my disease, I want to be educated, to me, that's such a positive thing to help them because ultimately with better outcomes, who's the most incented for great outcomes? It's the patient. We talk about health systems need better outcomes and yada, yada, yada. Well, the person who's most incentive is the patient.
Who's living with it, yeah.
Exactly. So the more they're informed, then I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for healthcare.
My favorite response I've seen to that mug is don't confuse your 10 minutes in medical school learning about my disease with my lifetime of living with it.
That's right.
So I think sometimes we really do underestimate just someone's own lived experience and what they actually know about managing and self-managing what they have. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So, Vinod Khosla predicted that we would have AI doctors replacing clinicians in a decade. And you're in a unique position to see what's actually possible. How do you see the role of the clinician evolving in this new era?
Yeah, part of it comes back to that wisdom. Like how can you, I don't think AI will ever be able to have that human element of applying wisdom where you're looking into the nonverbal cues, to the family situation, to the history. But I do think that these tools can very powerfully help clinicians make better decisions. And where I think it could be really powerful in terms of the future is right now, most clinical decision support, including UpToDate, it's more of a pull model where I say, oh, hey, I'm not sure what to do. Let me go ask UpToDate. So it really relies on me as a clinician to say, I have a question I need answered. I'm going to go ask. Well, what if there's something that I didn't think to ask and I missed it, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can get into the world where there's more of a push to say, hey, we're going to maybe sort of do a little bit of surveillance of the record to say, hey, we noticed that there were 3 blood pressures in a row that have been elevated. It looks like maybe this blood pressure pill isn't working like it should. You want to think about some alternatives, and here are some good choices. So more of that ability to say, how can we sort of nudge you as a clinician to do the right thing in terms of clinical decision support, as opposed to just relying on you to go and ask a clinical question. And that's where those workflow integrations become absolutely critical. Because if you're not in the workflow, you don't have the opportunity to say, I'm going to evaluate the overall patient status and say, are there things that you're missing that maybe could really help you with this patient, better care for the patient?
I dream of things where a clinician can set up small text-based interventions, like after my appointment, say, every month, I want you to send this reminder to this patient or ask this one question so that there's a little bit more continuous care throughout the year. And maybe with AI, the doctor doesn't even really have to be involved. It doesn't have to take much time. It can be these automations that are set up.
Yeah, Hallie, I am right on board with you from a population health standpoint, because I, as a provider, I'm thinking about you when you're sitting on the exam bed across from me, or you give me a call. The rest of the time, I'm not thinking about you. The other 364 days a year. So could we use AI to be sort of monitoring and saying, oh, this patient they didn't fill their meds, or what, their weight has been up, maybe their congestive heart failure is flaring, and sort of get triggers that would then initiate an outreach. So to, again, more proactive. But it's that ability, as an individual provider, if I have 800, 900, 1,000 patients, I can't think about that 365 days a year. You just can't do it.
No, it's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. So but maybe AI could be sort of keeping an eye on everything and then sending a trigger to my, to the care team to say, somebody maybe want to give this person a call.
Yeah. And having those conversations. I mean, we've seen in other industries where leaders are kind of training their digital twins so that they can kind of set them out into meetings. Do you see a world where you as a doctor have a digital twin that your patients can ask questions to, or would that just be too risky and you wouldn't want a tool speaking on your behalf?
Because those conversations can be so critical to if the patient needs a change in care or needs a treatment recommendation. I don't know that our technology is quite there yet. It's interesting. I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of the potential, but I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
Yeah. What about other areas for clinicians, like in upskilling, maybe nurse practitioners or others who we're seeing more often as kind of the front patient-facing clinician? How can AI and specifically UpToDate help them just practice at the top of their license?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is most exciting about our UpToDate expert AI solution is that when we looked at it, we said, okay, we could just use AI and create a synthetic response to a question. But we said, how can we actually use this technology to sort of evolve what UpToDate is and make it more of a clinical discussion, of more of a guided experience? And so one of the things that the solution does is when you ask a question, it starts out with the assumptions. So like to say, okay, you asked me about a 5-year-old that has a chronic cough, just as an example. And the solution is going to say, okay, you're asking about a 5-year-old. They're otherwise healthy. They're not immunocompromised. They don't have any chronic diseases. Because if those assumptions aren't true, the answer changes. So we're going to level set right out of the gate. And then we're going to say, oh, and by the way, chronic cough is 4 weeks or longer. If it's less than 4 weeks, it's a different answer. So we do all of those assumptions right up front to make sure that the patient you're asking about, the answer we're giving is going to be appropriate to that patient. So we do that. Then we give the answer, a really nice answer, differential diagnosis, workup, all that good stuff. And then we finish with what we call clinical nudges. So these are sort of things that sort of the clinical nuance that we know based on the content that's associated with whatever the question was. But maybe it's a little prod to say, hey, did you ask about this? So for example, in the 5-year-old with a chronic cough, did you ask, is there potential that there was a choking episode? If a child chokes on a marble or a raisin or what have you, and they potentially have a retained foreign body, that totally changes your management. So I think about learners, medical students, residents, even NPs, PAs, maybe they didn't think to ask these questions. Yeah. They say, oh, wow, maybe I need to run back and talk to the family if there was a choking episode, because that's totally going to change how I'll manage this patient.
Yeah. I've heard it said that AI can raise the ceiling and lower the floor for clinicians. And this is when I hear raise the ceiling, that's absolutely what it sounds like it's doing. And it's giving you this truly co-pilot for making decisions, information that previously had to be burned in your brain or something that had to be looked up after the visit versus kind of while you're in the conversation. Now that it really has changed what sort of information you have to retain in your brain as a clinician, what do you think that frees up? Does that kind of change who you are as a clinician because you can then focus on other things because you don't have to depend on so much memorization?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the balance between making sure that as we train clinicians that they have those critical thinking skills, but at the same time, we know these tools are here and they're not going anywhere. So like to just say we're going to keep, having people memorizing, having medical students memorizing the Krebs cycle, that world is long gone. That we know that. So even medical education needs to evolve to say, how can we teach our learners when to apply critical thinking with these tools, or how to evaluate these tools, or how to make sure that they're not doing errors of omission, meaning they get an answer, they go to generative AI, they get an answer, it's the wrong answer, but they don't have the ability to sort of assess that. So we have a lot to do in terms of how we even do medical training, frankly, in the context of all of these new tool sets. It's a training, assessment, like all of it, right?
Well, I think even what it takes to become a successful clinician will be different, because really so much of it was rote memorization and having all of that in your brain. And maybe with these tools, actually bedside manner and like other things, like being able to have a conversation and being empathetic, like maybe those things will matter more.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And just even getting into med school, like just requires, good performance on tests. Like that's not probably your base characteristic that you want in a physician.
Yeah. Well, finally, as you look ahead, what are you most optimistic about when it comes to AI in healthcare besides your own product? And then on the flip side of that, kind of what keeps you up at night?
Well, I'm so excited about UpToDate Expert AI. I've been showing it to CMIOs and CMOs and physician informaticists and colleagues, and like everybody's like, how do I get my hands on this? I've heard comments like, this is phenomenal. This is a game changer. We've been waiting for UpToDate to do this, and we've just had an amazing market response. We're like up to, I think, 2,500,000 users by the end of this month, and it hasn't even been officially released yet. So there's been just fantastic excitement about it. 70% of our largest customers are already have people using the tools. So it's really exciting. But when I think bigger picture about AI, I would really love to see how can we leverage AI to improve administrative efficiency. There's just so much waste in healthcare in the US that's all administrative. And is there a way that we can leverage AI to not just add solutions onto already sort of clumsy workflows or business processes and actually improve the underlying business processes themselves? Like think about as healthcare providers negotiate payer contracts, right? They're all specific to one payer. They're not standardized. One hospital can be across the street from each other and they have a totally different setup. And just think of the administrative costs associated with that. Like how could AI sort of help standardize your payer contracts so that you're doing the same thing for everybody and you just reduce that sort of administrative burden and free up money to be applied to patient care as opposed to just administrative tasks. I mean, that to me is really interesting.
And do you think we're seeing ROI on the early administrative tools now that they really have been rolling out? So some of the biggest hits in terms of healthcare have been with some of the ambient scribes like Abridge and Suki and others. And they're not seeing financial ROI. They're seeing improvements in terms of clinician satisfaction, less pajama time spent at night in the chart, less burnout, physician retention, which, it's expensive to lose in a physician. So those are the kind of ROI tools. On the rev cycle side, there are some companies doing some super interesting things with AI. Like there's a company called Iodine that just recently got acquired by Waystar. They're talking about how can we make some billing and coding workflows that sort of say, so if you're using clinical decision support as a physician, how can your billing just be sort of a natural out product of your decisions made using clinical decision support and your documentation, as opposed to making it this whole separate siloed workflow where somebody picks up the note afterward and applies. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there, and there'd be a big ROI as well. Yeah. And then I hate to end on a negative note, but what keeps you up at night? Do you have any worries about all this new tech coming into healthcare?
Well, I worry about it. Back to the ROI is increasing costs. So if we keep bolting on AI solutions, those just over time, each new AI solution is new costs for the healthcare system. So is it just making healthcare more expensive? I think broadly, like how is this truly, how do we get to a point where we're not spending so much money in the US on healthcare?
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, there have been studies that have shown how healthcare innovation is one of the only areas, the only industries where innovation is adding cost and where that cost doesn't go down over time. And we need to see that move, especially on the patient side, because we won't see access and equity if it's not something that is reasonably priced for everyone. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a good call out. Well, Holly, thank you so much for being here today. It was great to talk to you. Now, for folks who are interested in UpToDate's new AI tool, Expert AI, how can they get their hands on it?
Well, reach out to, so as you know, UpToDate, this is an enterprise solution. So it's something that's offered with individual healthcare organizations. So reach out to your rep and we'll get you online, get you started.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Holly.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I enjoyed the chat.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe. The Heart of Healthcare is produced by Hallie Tecco and hosted by Michael Esquivel, Steve Krause, and Hallie Tecco. The show is engineered, edited, and mixed by Kyle Moore. Visit our website, heartofhealthcarepodcast.com, for show notes and details.